The first component that you have to have in your Java program in order to use methods would be a class. So here we have an example of a plus bug, which is a class. We've looked at classes before when we started off with print and println. Inside of a plus bug, we have one method called speak. It's a void method. It doesn't return anything, which we'll talk about here in just a little bit. It's public, meaning you can use it anywhere. Inside the speak method, we have one println that prints out chirp chirp. So here, in order for us to use the a plus bug class, we have to instantiate a new object of that type of class and then make a reference which keeps track of it. So here we have dude. Dude is a reference that is pointing or keeping track of an a plus bug. So this diagram helps you out with that a little bit more. So dude is not the a plus bug, but it knows where the a plus bug is. So in the example, I'm using in blue OX234 is kind of a made up memory address. So understand that you can't actually in memory go to OX234 and find a bug. That's not how it works. I'm just using this for an example. So the dude reference doesn't store the bug, but it stores the address of the bug. So if I went to dude and said, hey, what do you got? I'm going to get OX234. If I go to OX234, I'm going to find an A plus bug. In this example, I've got 5 different references, dude 1 through dude 5, and then they're all pointing at new A plus bug objects. Methods. Now that we have a class, we can put some methods in there. Methods are where we're going to store related code segments and pieces of code. We're going to store those things there because we're trying to combine them together to perform some task or make some kind of action happen. Random, nextInt, and println are all methods. Println prints something out on the screen, moves to the next line. NextInt reads in an integer from the keyboard using a scanner, and then random generates random numbers. And so we'll be using all these items, all these methods as we go throughout the year. So here we go. In a plus bug, as we just looked at, we've got one method called speak. Every time we call speak, it runs a println for us to print out chirp chirp. So when you're creating a method, has to have an access, whether it's public or private, has to have void, int, or whatever telling you what it returns, has to have a name, potentially parameters, and then it has an open brace and a closed brace where you can put your code segments. So this chart shows you the components that you have to have whenever you're creating a method. So access, return type, name, parameters, and then you have to put some code inside if you want it to actually do something. So here I have dude, which is my reference to a new a plus bug object. I call the speak method on that reference and it prints out chirp chirp because that is what our code was designed to do. Here I'm calling speak 3 times, so I get chirp chirp 3 different times because I'm calling those speak methods on my dude reference. Now we're ramping it up a little bit. We're getting a little more sophisticated. We got a bird class now, and not only can the bird class speak, it can also say name. So every time I call speak, I get chirp chirp. Every time I call say name, I get baby bird. Notice that speak and say name are both void methods. They don't return anything, which, like I said, we'll talk about that shortly. And then they're both public, meaning you can use them anywhere. So just another follow-up on the diagram that we had before. Bird's the reference. I'm creating a new bird object, and then the bird reference is keeping track of that. So in order for us to use the bird class, just like with the a plus bug, you have to make a new object and then point a reference at it. So here I've made multiple birds and made multiple references to keep track of those birds. So now that I have my bird, I can call say name and make it print out baby bird multiple times. Now in this example, I'm calling speak and say name. So I'm getting chirp chirp and baby bird all mixed together depending on the number of calls that I make. So let's go out, let's take a look at bird and bird runner and kind of see all this stuff in action. Now that we've looked at some examples in the slides and some code segments where we have method calls being made and some examples of what a method looks like, let's actually go into the code and we'll make some changes. And what we're going to do as you're walking through this with me is we're going to do what you have to do, right? You have to go in and add methods and make calls and make changes. And you got to get your hands dirty to make sure that you totally understand how all this works. So what I'm going to do in demonstration wise is good, but you got to go and do your part too, otherwise you won't totally understand how this works. So when we're looking here at the examples, I have a birdrunner.java, which has a birdrunner class in it. Inside that it has a public static void main, which we used when we were doing all the print line stuff and all the basic input stuff and all that. So public static void main is going to be our driver. That's where we're going to put the actual bird instantiations and the method calls, and this is where we're going to actually make the program happen. Okay, and the other example that we have are the other files, bird.java, and bird.java, that's where we actually have the bird class and the methods that we will use. So inside bird, we have a speak method and the say name, just like the examples that we were looking at in the slides. And then in the bird runner, we have the instantiation code and the method calls taking place. So I have two objects that I'm instantiating. I've got a new bird with and pointing at it and a new bird with it pointing at it. And so let's run this and see if it does what we would expect it to do, which it does. So whenever I call all the methods on and, I call speak, say name, speak, and I get chirp, chirp, baby bird, chirp, chirp, which is exactly what we'd expect that to do. And we'll go back and forth in a second to make sure. And then in the next chunk of code, I have it, say name, and it, say name, which means I get baby bird twice. So just to follow up with what we were looking at in the slides, speak prints out chirp, chirp every time it's called, and say name prints out baby bird each time it's called. So let's go into speak. And I'm just going to copy this real quick, save a little time. Copy paste is your friend if you haven't figured that out already. So now I've got chirp chirp in here twice. I'm going to change this print line to funny. So now every time I call speak, it's going to print chirp chirp and funny. So I could add 600 lines of code in here if I wanted, which means when I go over to my runner, I'm going to get a 600 line segment executed every time I call that method that contains all those lines of code. So now let's go over here and run it again. And now every single time that we call speak, we get chirp, chirp, and funny. So now we've added 2 lines of code that we're activating with just one method call. So we could go over here and add all sorts of stuff to make these do whatever we want them to do. We could add in loops, you name it, we could do that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to copy our last method, say name, and we're going to create another method. Obviously, you could type all this from scratch if that's what you wanted to do. So when we make the new method, we're going to name this method hop. This isn't going to actually make the bird hop. We don't really have any way to do that right now. We're just messing with print lines. So we're going to put in here hop, hop, and hop. Okay, and it looks good enough. So now we're going to go over here and we're going to run bird runner. Notice it didn't print out hop, hop, hop. It didn't print out hop, hop, hop because we didn't go into the actual code and call the hop method to make that happen, right? So now that we've actually called the hop method and we run the code again, now in our first test 1 chunk of code, it's going to print out hop, hop, hop at the end because we actually made that call. So the name of the method is hop. The parameters, it doesn't have any. That's why there's nothing inside the parentheses when we make the call or when we made the definition. So anytime